Today is February 6, 2017. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Mike Gilliland in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Where or when?
Where?
I was born in Denver, Colorado.
And now when?
January the 21st, 1967.
1967. Who is your father?
James A. Gilliland.
And your mother?
Mary E. Gilliland.
What was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Danley, D-A-N-L-E-Y.
Okay. You go through school in Denver?
No, I went through school in Coffeyville, Kansas.
Coffeyville. Why did the family move to Coffeyville?
Well, my dad at the time, my mother's side of the family, which is quite large, all the members lived in and around the Denver area. That's why I was born out there. That's where we lived at the time. Eventually, her entire family migrated to Missouri, and we stopped in Coffeyville along the way and never left. And that's the explanation that I've been given.
Yeah. What type of work did your father do?
He retired. He was with the city of Coffeyville for about 25 years, water treatment plant.
Okay. And what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1985.
1985. You play sports?
I did.
What did you play?
Played football, and I didn't start until later on in high school because I had a bone deficiency disease that I was born with, and I could not get a release from my doctor until I was a junior in high school, so that's when I started playing.
Yeah. Have a good team?
We did back then.
What position did you play?
I played wide receiver.
Wide receiver?
Yep.
Okay. Go to state championship?
We did not that year. No.
Okay. What did you do for recreation in high school?
Oh, I played a lot of courtyard ball or sandlot ball. Although I couldn't be released by my doctor, I was still extremely active physically all through, from the childhood when I was diagnosed at 7 years old with Perthes disease all the way until I got my release when I was a junior. So I was very active in it. I loved to play basketball, baseball, football, anything like that, any kind of sporting activities. Really wasn't much into anything else at that point in my life.
In your schooling, who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, I would have to say probably Mrs. Patterson, my third grade elementary teacher.
Why was she your favorite?
Something about her structure and her command for authority. Mm-hmm. It was very unusual for a female, particularly in the 70s. Mm-hmm. You didn't see it much, but she was very authoritative, and she demanded respect not because she asked for it, but because you knew that she needed it.
Okay. Now, how old were you when the family moved to Coffeyville?
We were 4 years. I was 4 years old. Okay.
So you went through all elementary all the way through high school
yes.
in Coffeyville? Okay, okay. The Dalton Museum up there.
Yes.
It's not the Dalton Museum. What's the name of that museum?
It's the Dalton Museum. Unless they've changed the name of it.
Well, I heard that they didn't want to honor the Dalton because they were outlaws.
Well, the last time I drove by there was just a couple of years ago. I went to the Dalton Defender Days where they do the Dalton reenactment in the downtown area, and it was still the Dalton Museum. I didn't go into it, but we drove by it and I showed my family.
Okay.
And I believe it was still the Dalton Museum.
Okay.
And it may have changed since then.
Because I think someone said they didn't want to honor outlaws, so I think it was the Dalton Defenders Museum, the Coffeyville Defenders Museum or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, they waited a good long while because that was in 1892.
1892.
So
long before your time and my time.
Yes.
Yeah. No, they were in Bartlesville.
Yes.
Yes.
That's correct.
And there was one guy named McAdoo that said you can't rob two banks at one time and left. But we're getting off the topic. What did you do after high school?
Well, I have to get my brain in gear here and start thinking backwards. After high school, I was working for Chaffin Incorporated. At that time, they owned Gibson's discount centers.
Okay.
And I think they were in this region, Coffeyville, I had one, I worked there. I did that for a while. I was the shipping and receiving clerk there. And
What was the name of the company?
Gibson Chaffin
Chaffin?
Incorporated. I believe they were out of Dodge City or somewhere up in Kansas was their home office.
Okay.
I worked for a place called Recon that we reconditioned 55 and 33 gallon drums for oil companies. Did that for a little while. I think there was something else in there I did before I eventually signed up for the military.
Okay. Now, when did you join the Marines?
I left for the Marines. I signed up on a delayed entry program. I think I was about 8 or 10 months before I actually went in.
Okay.
And I don't even recall now why they had me go into the delayed entry program. But eventually I left in October of 1987 for boot camp.
Now, why'd you join the Marines over the Army, Navy, or Air Force?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force. I don't have a lot of as large as both my mom and my dad's families are, and they both have 11 siblings in each family. There wasn't a lot of military background, so that's usually a lot of people's reasons for joining. That was not mine. However, my middle brother joined the Marine Corps, and I looked up to him quite a bit, and he was about 10 days away from graduating Marine Corps boot camp, and he broke both of his femur bones in his legs and was medically discharged. And there was something inside of me at 19 years old at that time that I just felt like I not had to go do it, but I wanted to for him. And I can't say it was totally for me, but I will say, like my recruiter told me back then, what else do you have going on? So like a lot of 18-year-olds, part of it was well, there's nothing else going on in your life, so let's try this.
Yes. Where'd you go for boot camp?
Camp Pendleton, MCRD, Marine Corps San Diego.
MCRD?
MCRD, San Diego, California.
Tell me about boot camp.
Oh, it was lovely, paradise, 3-month vacation, free. Boot camp, I have to say, because my middle brother set me down for weeks and weeks and weeks, for probably over a year, from the time he was discharged until I went in, and he prepped me for every single thing that was going to happen.
What's his name?
Jimmy Gilliland.
Okay.
And he had me so prepped that when I got, literally, there were no surprises. And boot camp, as you know, is full of surprises. So really what I can say about it is, not braggadociously, but I did very well with boot camp because I was so mentally prepared and physically. And it was just, even as prepared as I was, it was still unbelievably just an experience that you'll never get anywhere else.
What type of training did you have?
Well, in basic training, you go through a lot of obstacle courses. You do a lot of hiking. We had some large mountains in San Diego area that we used to hike up those mountains with our packs on. I think one of our hikes was a 3-day hike, so very strenuous, very tiresome. A lot of running, a lot, as you can imagine. But probably what stands out more than physical to me, which for a lot of guys it is very physical. It's unlike anything they've ever done. But for me, it was just the unbelievable amount of verbal, and I don't call it abuse because it's not abuse. They're training you for what you need to be trained for, but the verbal beating and preparation that you take during boot camp, even as ready as I was, down to the last detail, it was still shocking.
Now, on these hikes, did you have a full field pack?
Yes.
What's in a full field pack?
Well, at that time, for us, I think we had a full change of obviously your skivvies, your socks. The most important thing you learn is you always better have dry socks. So we had 2 or 3 pairs of socks. We'd have our field shovel, our fox shovel. We carried MREs, meals ready to eat. You would have your canteen, and then you would have usually one or two different sets of your uniform, your camouflage military uniform that you wore in the field. Probably a towel, and then of course your hygiene gear.
What weapon did you train with?
We trained with the M16A2.
Now, what's the difference between the A2 and the A1?
The only difference, I know I can identify them on paper easily, but the A2, my guess, obviously the A1 was used earlier, and by the time my era went through, we were on the A2s, probably just a lot better service weapon than what the A1s were.
Tell me about your drill instructors.
Well, we had 4 per platoon, and we had, I think each platoon started with about 100 recruits, and so we had 4 platoons in each, or 4 squadrons in each platoon. So you would have 4 drill instructors, and primarily you would have what they call a senior drill instructor, and he was the senior, he was ultimate in command, and then you would have 3 juniors. Usually weren't as high ranking. Your senior was always usually your highest ranking, more experienced, and more the gentle spirit would come around. Now he would quote unquote slap you when you needed slapped, and I don't mean that as though he really slapped you, but he put you in your place. He drew enough attention and command. You didn't disrespect anything about him, but yet he was a gentle spirit. He was more the encourager, and a lot of times he would come in late in the evenings after your 3 juniors had beaten you down all day, and you'd done all the physical training and the verbal training that you could put up with, and you showered. Well, then he would come in what we called our 15 minutes of quiet time, and he would walk up and down the squad bay giving us more of a pep speech, pep talk, oorah, you're doing great, we're getting closer. And then your 3 juniors, they were very, very hands-on. Every day you were on the marching pad. You were learning, new maneuvers, and so those guys were in your day-to-day, hands-on, very in-your-face type of drill instructors.
You pull KP?
I didn't have to pull KP in boot camp. I was a squad leader, and they gave me a completely different assignment over at the headquarters, and I was what they called a runner. And the rest of my squadron, other than the other 3 squad leaders and myself, we didn't pull KP.
Now, what does a runner do?
Well, what I did, they put me in a building with one of the command leaders of the base, and what I would do is I would sit in the doorway, I would greet officers as they came in and left. I would answer any questions if somebody was looking for somebody, but mainly what I was doing was running paperwork from this building over across the base to that building, bring paperwork back, that type of thing.
What's your most vivid memory of boot camp?
Oh, a boot camp? Probably, I don't know if, I tell the story frequently. I can only tell it and let people judge for themselves. But the first day of boot camp is probably everybody's most memorable moment. Just the shock of getting off of that bus and facing your drill instructors and all this screaming going on for 24 straight hours nonstop is just absolute, you're scared to death. And when I stepped off that bus, our drill instructor stepped on the bus. After everybody flew in, they bussed us to MCRD, and so you have just all these buses lined up with all these brand new recruits wearing civilian clothes, long hair, earrings, whatever it is that you're doing. And I didn't have earrings or long hair, I can tell you that. But just those drill instructors stepping on that bus, from the second you see them up close and personal, it's no longer on a film that the recruiter shows you. It's no longer on the commercial that you see on TV or on a billboard. They're in your face, and you never, ever forget that.
Get a haircut?
I got a good haircut.
I guess everybody got a good haircut.
Everyone did.
Even the long hair guys.
Yes.
What about the earrings?
Well, I only remember one guy that had them in, and I was just shocked that anybody would show up with that. But inevitably, there's always that 10%. They came out real quick. I don't remember seeing any blood, but I remember seeing him move real fast.
So after boot camp, where'd you go?
After boot camp, I had a 10-day leave, like everybody does after boot camp, and then you go to your Alpha school for your training. And so I went to, after my 10 days of leave, I reported to Millington Naval Station, Air Naval Station in Millington, Tennessee.
Now, what is Alpha School?
Well, they call it, it's for short, they say your A school, but it's your primary MOS, military occupational school. It's that training that you go
And
to.
you were going to being trained to do what?
I was a 6531 aviation ordnance.
Okay. And it was at, where in Tennessee?
Millington, Tennessee.
Millington, Tennessee.
It's just outside of Memphis.
Okay. So tell me about your Alpha School.
Well, it's about, I believe it was about 6 months, 5 months long, something like that. Reported in January of 1988, and I think I graduated there in June of 1988. It's very different, obviously, from boot camp. You don't really know what to expect, especially at a young age, and you're just completely open. Well, you show up, you go to boot camp where you're getting screamed at for 3 consecutive months, 24/7, and you're under the drill instructor's thumbs. I mean, everything is guided by what they tell you to do. Well, then you report to A school, and it's actually quite refreshing and shocking to realize, oh, okay, so this does get normal again. There's no drill instructors. There's a lot of class instructors, and then of course you live in the squadrons or the squad base, barracks, whatever they have. But it's very more, it's like going and learning a job, only a lot more structure. You live with all the guys you train with, you report to school, you eat with them, so it's still the structure, but it's the back off. It's okay, now you're a grown man, but you need to learn what you're going to be doing for the next 4, 5, 6 years.
Okay. Now, aviation ordnance.
Yes.
Is this for a specific airplane or just generic?
A school is generic. You just learn all about all of the ordnance that the Marine Corps uses on every type of plane. It's ordnance that you learn for aircraft, because ordnance for ground troops go to a different type of school, so we're not intermingled. But you don't know what type of aircraft you're going to be working on yet, so you're just learning the ordnance part of it.
So what's your most vivid memory of your Alpha School?
Oh, Alpha School went pretty smooth. It was really, like I said, it was nice and refreshing after 3 months of boot camp. It was fun. It was super interesting. Nothing you'll ever be trained for in the civilian world, obviously. But you don't really know what you're going to be using it for. So there's still that big question mark, what am I doing? I'm learning all this stuff about, missiles and bombs and all these kinds of things, but what am I doing? That is still not there. But probably most vivid memory is just the amount of information that they put on you, because there's still a lot of pressure, there's still a lot of stress. You're going to learn a lot of information in a short amount of time. They're not there to be a leisurely vacationing spot where you learn a few things a day. No, they're going to pack it in.
Okay. What about the camaraderie?
It's a lot of the guys not a lot, but there were, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen guys from my boot camp, from my platoon that was there. So it's always nice to see guys that you spent some time with in boot camp, and now they're over here. Now you never know if they're going to go on to the next duty station with you, but still you've got that friendship that you've already built. But all the other guys, I don't know if all the services were like this, but certainly was in the Marine Corps. The camaraderie was good everywhere. I mean, it was a tight brothership, and it didn't matter if you just met this person an hour ago. It didn't take long to become very tight with those guys.
Okay. Now, did you handle real ordnance, or was it just training ordnance, or?
In A school, it's just training ordnance.
Training ordnance.
Yes.
Okay. So after Alpha School, where'd you
Well, you go to your secondary training school after that, and for me, I was stationed. They sent me back to California, Camp Pendleton, and that I believe was from June of '88. I think we graduated October, November of '88, so another 5 months, because I think my total schooling was about 10 months,
Okay.
and they were pretty much split in half. But it's what they call the OJT, the on-the-job training. You actually go handle, and they designate and tell you what squadron you're going to be assigned to. So at that point in time, you know what kind of aircraft you're working with. And for me, it was going to be UH-1N and the UH-1N Hueys and the AH-1W Cobras. So those were the two types of aircraft that I was working with.
I was on Hueys in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I probably worked on the same ones that you flew in Vietnam. They were old aircraft.
Now, what did you feel like going back to Camp Pendleton after boot camp?
Well, MCRD, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, is in San Diego.
Okay.
Camp Pendleton is 35 miles north.
Okay, okay.
Different bases.
Yes, okay. So tell me about your secondary school.
Secondary school, again, you're reporting to a new duty station. It was nice to see some of the guys that, you overlap classes. So I had met some guys, and then I got back out to my secondary training school, and there were guys out there that I'd already met. So there was some of that, again, you're meeting up with some of the guys you met before. And so you had some of that, and then you had some of the, I had a couple of guys that went with me to Camp Pendleton from Millington. So it wasn't a totally new thing, because you did have some guys that you already knew, but it was very much the same concept of learning ordnance, only now you're learning about the particular ordnance and how it works on these two aircraft that you're going to be working the rest of your military career on.
Now, were you assigned to a unit?
Not at that time until I graduated later that fall.
Okay. So what did you do on the Hueys?
Well, the Hueys, what I was trained to do and what I did once I got to my full assignment was anything that had to do with Huey ordnance, which you've got 2.75-inch rockets, you've got 5-inch rockets. Those all fit in the rocket pods. You've got the GAL-2Bs, which are the machine guns that they fire out of the door. You've got the chaff and the flare system that basically deflect any type of ordnance coming towards that aircraft. Huey doesn't have near as much as the Cobra, but it still has some of those things that, as far as ordnance, that you still load up, and in wartime you're still going to always have a Huey loaded up.
Is this the minigun?
The GAL-2B shoots about 6,000 rounds per minute.
Okay.
Yeah. And you also had the 60 cal that you could load on there. The GAL-2B was the funner of the two, but the 60 cal was a very common ammunition piece that went on the Huey as well.
What's the crew of a Huey?
Well, you've got the pilot, the co-pilot. You've got a crew chief, and sometimes two crew chiefs. You may have a door gunner depending on the mission. You may have an observer, so it could be anywhere from usually at least 3. You always had the 2 pilots and at least 1 crew chief in there. If you're just doing typical maintenance routine flight patterns, if you will, to try to test the systems and things like that. But like I said, you may have a full crew of 7 guys in there if you've got it completely loaded up and you're using all your different positions available to you.
Now, were you ever on flight status?
No.
Okay.
No, I flew in them, but it was usually being transported to different locations. But as far as flight status, no.
Okay. So, but you were actually handling the real ordnance this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was there where's the gunnery range for the Hueys? Was it?
Well, we utilized 29 Palms, California, and Yuma, Arizona.
Okay.
Those were our 2 primaries. I mean, we had some in Camp Pendleton, but when we went on the very large 30-day detachments, 2-week detachments, we would usually fly over and do those in 29 Palms and Yuma.
Now, the same question, what's your most vivid memory of your secondary school?
Secondary school, probably just the excitement. Finally coming to a point where you go through 3 months of boot camp, go through 5 months of training in your A school, then you get moved to your secondary school, and just that feeling of maybe coming from nowhere, a small town, not doing anything, to feel like this is really cool. I mean, I'm getting ready to work on multi-million-dollar aircraft, and I've been trained to do that, and it wasn't easy. And I think for me, it was just looking back and thinking, I've arrived.
So from Camp Pendleton, where'd you go?
Well, I was stationed at Camp Pendleton. That was my primary home base for the rest of my time. I was on a 5-year contract.
Okay.
Pardon me. And the only way I could do a 5-year contract was to sign up for this particular field, because they have such an extensive, almost a year-long training. When that's over, they still want to get the 4 years out of you.
Yes.
So the only way you could get into this field was to sign a 5-year contract.
Okay.
So I signed a 5-year contract. So after my secondary training school in Camp Pendleton, all I did was move across base, and that was my home base for the next 4 years. And so I did a lot of detachments from my home base, and Western Pacific tours, Desert Storm, those types of things, Yuma, 29 Palms. But all that time, my home base was right there at Camp Pendleton.
What unit were you assigned to?
Well, it was a Marine Aircraft Group. They called them MAG 39. And that was, my particular squadron was HMLA 367. HMLA, Helicopter Marine Light Attack, and a designation 367, because in Camp Pendleton there are, I think, maybe 4 or 5 light attack helicopter squadrons, and then there's a training squadron just for training pilots. So HMLA 367 was my designation.
Now you said you went to the Pacific.
We did a Western Pacific tour. I think I did that 1989, and that was basically where they take the different squadrons, and you go on an 18-month rotation. So you'll go on a Western Pacific tour for 6 months, and while you're home, the other squadrons, or while you're away on these tours, the other squadrons will be at home at Camp Pendleton training. Then you come back after 6 months, and the next squadron goes out for 6 months. So you're on an 18-month rotation. So I did one of those Western Pacific tours for 6 months, and that's basically where they split your squadron right down the middle. We had about 300 members in each squadron, and half of you would go to Okinawa, Japan, and train over there for 6 months, and the other half of the squadron would go on this Western Pacific tour for 6 months. And so we were attached to part of a naval fleet, and the USS Tarawa was an aircraft carrier. So we would take half of our aircraft, half of our squadron, and we would attach with them, and we'd go out in the Western Pacific for 6 months, go to different ports, train with different countries with their military, and then we'd come back and meet up with the rest of our squadron from Okinawa, and then we'd sit it out for 12 months while the other rotations went.
So were you on the Taro?
I was on the USS Tarawa a few times.
Okay.
But on that Western Pacific tour, we did a little 2-week training attachments with them just off of the coast in California. And so we kind of learned about the ship, and they had a fleet of them. So we'd have part of our troops would go on the carrier, part of us would go on a battleship. So they had all the different types of ships, and we would kind of split up and go out on those ships, and we would train for a couple of weeks at a time, sometimes 2 or 3 days. And then when it came time to go out on a full steam 6-month tour with them, we already was acquainted with what they do, what we do. Everybody knew the role, and then it was much more smooth sailing.
Okay. So you were on the Tarawa how long?
6 months.
6 months.
Yes.
Okay. How many men on the Tarawa?
I think, if memory serves me correct, there's about 2,000, maybe 2,500.
Where were your quarters on the Tarawa?
Somewhere deep in the bow. No windows. Oh, I really couldn't tell you. That ship was so big. And I used to remember all these things. Obviously, when you first come off of them, you know about everything about them. But I think they say, those carriers are about the length of a football field, maybe a little longer, and every bit as wide, 20 stories high. So you can be but it was tight. I do remember that. It was very tight quarters.
What was your duty on the Tarawa? What did you do?
Very similar to what we would do if we were at Camp Pendleton training. We would load aircraft, and of course this is a little bitty small piece of the puzzle of what the whole mission is. But our part as aviation ordnancemen, aviation techs, is mainly maintaining the ordnance system, all the weapons systems, so they operate properly, which they don't. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into keeping those aircraft operating, the weapon systems and all the other systems as well. And so what we would do is, once we were on the aircraft, we would act just like we did on the ground, which is we would get our orders to load all these different aircraft with these type of ammunitions. And so once we did that, they would fire up, they would move over to their go spot, and then we would basically, the aircrafts turn it up. And a lot of this is done at night. And that's one of the primary purposes of this training, is to do night training. So what we would do is, whether it was day or night, is we would go over and arm the aircraft, which you're in sync with the pilot, you're in sync with the guy up top that's calling all the orders and sending everything out on time and all that. So basically you would arm all those systems that you had loaded over here. They would move the aircraft, get ready to take off, and you would load or arm them, everything you loaded, and then they would take off.
Are you still on Huey's?
Cobras more. Huey's was light ordnance. Like I said, you might have a rocket pod and a 60 cal and a gal and some chaff and flare, which is pretty light ordnance in my opinion, compared to what we would do on the Cobras.
Okay. And what nations did you train with?
What
nations did you train with?
When we were on the Western Pacific tour, we did quite a bit of training with Subic Bay over in the Philippines, Olongapo City in the Philippines. We went to Hong Kong. We went to Sasebo, Japan. We did training with Okinawa, Japan, with that group over there as well. We went to Thailand. And we had some bad weather. We were supposed to do some training in Australia, and we got caught in a bad weather pattern, and we tried to bypass that, so we never did train with them. Yeah. So we ended up going back around and doing more training with the Philippines. So I think all in all, there were about 5 or 6 different countries that we met up with in the Western Pacific.
Okay. I'm going to ask a generic question.
Okay.
What was your average day on the Tarawa?
Well, first and foremost, you work 12. They split our shifts. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, okay? And you didn't complain about 12 hours because it was so boring. You could have easily worked 15 or 16 and probably not complained, because there's just not a lot to do out there. Now, when you're in port, it's different. But when you're in the water and you're just sitting there or moving 3 or 4 knots, there's not a whole lot to do. So you would work about 12-hour shifts, 12 on, 12 off, and what you do is come in, and just like you did, much of it was just like what we did at our home base in Camp Pendleton or anywhere else that you're at. You would come in, and the first most important thing that you do with aircraft is you take inventory. It's the most important thing you do, and they teach you that and teach you that and teach you that in all your schooling, your hands-on training, everything. Because as you can imagine, there are so many tools being used by all these different departments that work on these aircraft. If one little tool is left somewhere where it shouldn't be on that aircraft, we may have a catastrophe. So they call it, we did FOD walks every single beginning of every shift. You did a FOD walk. FOD stands for foreign object debris. You would walk the flight line. You would look for anything that was out of the ordinary, any kind of dirt, debris, anything that could be sucked up into the intakes. You made sure, so safety was the very first thing you did on every shift change. And then you would take inventory. You'd have to report all of your toolboxes, because every toolbox is inventoried by number, alpha and then numbers. So each department, like the Aviation Ordnance Department, the Aviation Electronics Department, each department had numerous toolboxes that they used. And inside that toolbox, every tool is marked and has a place. So when you come on shift, everybody opens up the toolboxes, you do an inventory, report it back, everything goes back to flight control, quality control, check off, and then once everything's good, now we can start maintenance. We go out, we start working on aircraft, you get your orders from the maintenance department, because every time the pilots fly and come back, there's things that aren't working right. So they make a list. The list goes to quality control brings it out, has a meeting with all the department heads. Department head brings the list in, hands it to the troops and says, I want you three to go work on this issue on this aircraft. All the aircraft are numbered. And so that's how you did it. And that's what your 12 hours consisted of, was fixing maintenance problems. And then on the part of your shift, you would more than likely have a few hours there where you're loading ammunitions for training purposes with the pilots that are going out and flying and all that. And so usually what we would do is split up our crew. We'd have a maintenance crew today and an armament crew today, and then tomorrow we'd switch.
Okay.
So you're doing maintenance one day, you're doing actual loading and arming ordnance the next.
Now, is this maintenance on the weaponry or maintenance on the aircraft?
On the aircraft.
On the aircraft.
Yeah, there's not really much of anything you can do. Now, on the weapons themselves, the 60 cal, the aircraft, the AH-1W Cobra helicopter has a 20 millimeter gun on a turret underneath the belly. That required a ton of maintenance. Your 60 cals, your 50 cals, anything that we loaded over onto the Hueys, those required a lot of maintenance. The Gal 2Bs, so there was constant, and they had like 28-day maintenance timetables, 14-day maintenance timetables. So everything was, as you can imagine in the military, structured. So you had a manual for a 14-day maintenance on this particular weapon. Mm-hmm. It only consisted of breaking it down so far. But then if you had a 28-day maintenance requirement on this weapon, now you're breaking it all the way down. It's a much more detailed maintenance of it. So there's different maintenance levels for each weapon, but most of the maintenance was done on those particular weapons. And then mostly what you have is they would come back, their aircraft would come back and the pilots would say, the 20 millimeter turret is not, it's only coming 45. I can't get it over here to 60. Or it's not firing. Or we fired the Hellfire missile over here, but we didn't get a green light. So if it was a real piece of ammunition, it wouldn't have went. Tow launchers. Always having, so you have all those things, but the amount of vibration and the moisture, and then if you go into the desert, I mean, there's just different environmental things that impact all of these weapons and weapon systems. And it requires a lot of maintenance, and it requires a lot of troubleshooting to find out, because the wiring harnesses that run these weapon systems on this Cobra, mm-hmm. and even on the Huey, we use schematic books that are that thick, and it can take days sometimes to figure out and troubleshoot something why they're not getting a green light. And somewhere down that wire, there may be a broken diode, there might be a short, you just never know. But it may take days sometimes to fix a problem.
Now on maintenance, will you like change the oil filter, fuel filter, all this?
No, that's strictly done by a different department that
Okay.
works on the engines.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's what I did.
Okay.
So that tour lasted how long, you say?
6 months.
6 months, okay. Anything happened on that, during that 6 months?
Yeah, there was, and obviously we were on there with other squadrons. Different types of aircraft are on there. We had the helicopter squadron. There was a fast mover squadron that was on there. So you would have different squadrons.
Fast mover squadron.
A jet.
Okay.
You know, F-18s or 16s
okay.
or Harrier or something like that. We did have on the Western Pacific one of the helicopters of our sister squadron. It was a nighttime operation, and they came to land on the back of the ship. And a lot of times what they're training is just like if they were in war. So the ships are moving a lot of times. These pilots are getting training, taking off, coming back, landing, taking off, coming back, and landing. So they can do that by instinct when it comes time to have to perform if you go to war. And so we had and so you obviously have a lot of green pilots that are getting their training in. And we did have one of the Hueys came in and went to land and landed partway on the back of the ship and obviously flipped over the edge, and we lost all the members of that crew. So, but as far as the Western Pacific Tour, with the amount of training that they do, the number of operations, it's unbelievable. But of course, you know, safety is the number one thing.
Yes.
And so you have high expectations, but the amount of operations you do, things like that are going to happen.
Yes.
So,
Now, was this before or after the Soviet Union collapsed?
this is all after.
After, okay.
Yeah.
When did the Soviet Union collapse? That was sometime in the 80s.
Early 80s, I think,
Okay, I don't remember.
because I was in under Clinton,
Yeah.
President Clinton, and that was obviously when he took over from Reagan.
Yeah. Okay. So, after your tour, Western Pacific, where'd you go?
Came back to our home base in Camp Pendleton, did several other weapons training, what they call WTI's weapons training incorporated. And what we do is go to the desert for 30, 60 days, which again was 29 Palms, California, and Yuma, Arizona. We did do some training up at Fallon, Nevada. They have an air base up there. We did a little bit of training up there. But most of ours from Camp Pendleton, we went over to Yuma and 29 Palms. And it was similar to the Western Pacific. It's similar to what we do at Camp Pendleton, but they were introducing you to training and missions in the desert. And so this is long before, you know, they've been doing this long before Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to be quite frank with you, many times we were out there and it was just like being in a desert somewhere else. There's nothing there. You're training, you're working about 12, 16 hours a day. There's nothing to do. All you want to do is work because it's boring and time's going slow, and you're out there for 2 weeks or a month. And so that's all you do is train. And I can remember myself and many of my friends cursing, why are we out here? What are we doing training in the desert, you know? Because we would always refer back to Vietnam. That was always the go-to. You know, why aren't we training in the jungle? As though that would be any better.
Yeah.
But that was kind of our way of just not knowing that you never know when you could be in the desert in a war.
And how long did you do this in the desert training?
Oh, I guess probably the better part of 2 years, because we went to Desert Shield in August of 1990. So I finished up my training school in fall of '88, so about close to 2 years.
Anything happened in the desert while you were there? Any
Yeah.
incidents?
Very similar to, like I said, the training when we were on the Western Pacific, or not the Western Pacific, but we were just doing little detachments here and there on the ships. I'd actually just went on what they call a FARP site, Forward Arming Refueling Post. And on that FARP site, it was myself, my gunnery sergeant. We were in charge of the weapons for that particular mission. And we were both flying on one of the Hueys. And we always fly, everything's either in 2 or 4, or could be more, but generally 2s. Most of your missions are done, you're flying in pairs. Pair of Hueys, pair of Cobras, maybe the 2 of them, the 4 together, whatever, but you're always in pairs. And the aircraft that myself and my gunnery sergeant were on, we had just gotten off. We were doing training out in Yuma, Arizona, and there's a lot of desert area out there, hilly, and we had just gotten to our forward arming refueling post, and I got off. We reloaded all the weapons. The new crew got on, and they picked up after they refueled, took off, and they were probably what looked by air to be maybe 1,000 yards at the most. We could see an explosion. We didn't see the aircraft, but it was hilly off in the direction they went. We didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but we looked up at one point and we could see a big ball of fire, and we knew we had just seen the aircraft heading that way. And one of them had, the main rotor had snapped. One of the pieces of the main rotor had snapped, and the aircraft, of course, they just started spinning out of control, and they flew into the side of a hill, and that was the aircraft that we'd just gotten off of. So it was very, very freakish for both of us. I mean, it just, not only did we know the crew, killed the 2 pilots up front, the 3 members in the back were badly injured, but they lived. But that was probably the thing that stands out the most to me on all of our mission trips out there. So,
What was your reaction when you heard Saddam had invaded Kuwait?
I didn't know who Saddam was. I didn't know where Kuwait was. I didn't know much about oil. Of course, we learned real quick. We started having immediate, because the higher-ups knew, I mean, the organization was already in place, I'm sure, within hours after it happened. But so I soon learned about him, and I had heard his name, and knew Iraq, but didn't know much about, that part of the world at 20, 21 years old.
So tell me about going to Desert Shield.
Well, we were notified within, I think, 3 or 4 days that we were going to be part of MAG 70, Marine Aircraft Group 70. That was going to be deployed over to Saudi Arabia. Just not much details at all, other than we're getting these aircraft ready. We're starting to load all of our gear up into these boxes that'll be shipped over. I mean, we started preparing. They definitely told us we're leaving. We just didn't know when. And we got the word, I think, August the 13th, they told us we're leaving in 2 days. So August 15th, I believe, is when my outfit actually left the States to go over to Desert Shield.
Now, how'd you travel?
We travel on a C-5 Galaxy. As you probably know, it's the largest aircraft in the world, transport aircraft, and we had, I think, 4 different C-5s that loaded up all of our equipment, all of our troops, and all of our gear, and we flew over on those 4 C-5s.
What about your aircraft?
You break them down so they fit in the belly of the C-5s best. You take blades off, and of course the Hueys are very thin line anyway. They're not very wide aircraft, they're just long. The Hueys kind of take up some room, so you take off some of the side equipment off of those, the armament things. So you just kind of make them compact, and you load everything, all the blades, nice and neat. You cram the aircraft together in there. And I believe we had 24 aircraft, so we got 6 on each one of the C-5s, plus gear, plus troops. And of course the troops right up in the top part, and all the transports down in the bottom on the cargo. So it was it was my first trip on a C-5. I've been on C-130s, but I'd never been on a C-5. I had never seen a C-5 up close. It was unbelievable how big that aircraft was.
And you flew to where in Arabia?
Well, we flew to Rhein-Main Air Base in Germany and refueled, stayed over one night, went to their chow hall, and the joke is, that's the best food I had in 5 years. At any chow hall, that's probably the best I ate, was at that Air Force base in Germany. It was like eating at a nice restaurant. So we arrived at Al Jabal in Saudi Arabia, and that's where we camped for a long time.
Where's that located? Al Jabal?
Al Jabal. I think a lot of people just refer to it as Jabal. J-A-B-A-I-L, I believe, was the spelling. And it was, I don't know miles, I don't recall how close it was to the Kuwaiti border. I know we were south and probably maybe a little west of Kuwait.
Okay. Were you close to Dhahran?
All the names sound familiar,
Dhahran's on the coast. That's where we were.
Yeah,
Dhahran.
we weren't, I don't think we were that close to that area.
Okay. So how long were you there?
We were there from the middle of August. Like I say, August 15th is when we pulled out from Camp Pendleton. And then I came home April the 12th of the next year.
What did you do during that? What did you do in Arabia before the war started?
Nothing.
No.
It was the most miserable, unbelievable, boring time of my life and everybody's life that was around me. There was no town around us. We never went anywhere. We never got, maybe our logistics crew did. We never knew what they did because they had all the perks. And they had the trucks, and so they could go, and you never knew what they were doing. They may have seen some things and enjoyed a little bit of time there, but the rest of us, we were stay put. We were intense with, I think the first 3 or 4 months, we were intense with just sand for the bottom. And that's where we built our tent city, was just on top of the sand. And it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 months later the Seabees, the Navy Seabees, started making their way around to our area and built us floors, plywood floors. And so they built all of our floors and we put our tent. So we then had a plywood floor, and that was the highlight. Until the war was really the highlight. But until then, the Seabees were our heroes.
What was the terrain around Jebel?
Flat. Just all flat as far as you could see. Windy, hot. I think the day I got there, it was 100, midday, it was about 125 degrees. Dry. And it was just, it created chaos for all of the equipment.
What'd you do during that time?
I've never been a card player, but most of my friends played cards. And I think, believe it or not, there was a couple of us that, I mean, you just had to keep your sanity. It was literally like being, I don't know what prison's like, but I have to believe that I kind of have an idea now. Not quite to that extreme, but pretty darn close. Just absolutely nothing but time to kill.
Did you have television?
No, we did not have television. I don't even think we had radios, and if we did, I don't even know if we'd know what we were listening to. We probably really just stayed busy because of the climate over there and that sand, what it did to all of our equipment. As far as the aircraft, it was very, very, very hard on the aircraft. So we probably spent 25, maybe 50% more time actually doing maintenance on our aircraft than we did back in the States.
Yeah.
Just because it was so hot and the sand would get in everything, that it was just torture on any kind of mechanism that had a moving part.
Now, did you eat MREs? Did you have a cook section?
We ate MREs for a long time. We all got really good at trading. You learned who the good negotiators were. And I was probably one of the better ones.
Were there any better ones in that area?
No, the MREs now are much better. There's so many more options.
Yeah.
Back then, I think they had an A and a B category, but I think you only had 3 or 4 selections of each. And now I don't even remember what the A and the B was, why they had 2 different classifications, but they still do. But there are like 12 or 15, I think, different assortments now. They're better. They're just, but to be honest with you, back then, I mean, they were fine. When you're just sitting there in the desert eating, now it got old eating the same thing over and over and over. And we didn't have anything cold. I mean, there was no refrigeration. We weren't drinking it. They eventually started shipping water into us, just bottled water, but the only thing you could do, a lot of times what we would do is take a bottle of water and set it inside one of our socks. Yeah. And take water and soak the sock. Yeah. And set it down in the ground. So at least the next morning for a couple hours you might have some cool water.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
You talked about the MREs and put them in a sock?
We used to take our bottled water and put it in a sock.
Yes, the bottled water, I'm sorry.
And we would take water and drench your sock and put it down in the sand. We'd dig these holes out and put them in the sand and cover them up. So the next day when you got up, you could at least have some pretty chilled water for a couple hours until it started getting warm again. Yeah. So.
Have any local people in that area?
No.
No one.
No one.
Any local animals? You ever seen anything?
I saw camels. We saw camels. I saw plenty of scorpions, and did actually see a few, not me, but I saw one, but I mean amongst all of our group, reports of sand vipers, which are pretty deadly.
Yes.
Matter of fact, there were, if I recall right, there were several instances early on when Norman Schwarzkopf was getting all of our troops over there. There was some cases of snake bites. I think I'd even heard a couple of people were killed by the venom. So what we did immediately was started, every time you went out to work on an aircraft, you had to go in pairs. One would watch, because a lot of what you did was you had to lay on the ground, because a lot of times you're working under the belly of the aircraft. So you'd have to take the panels off and work. And so what we did immediately was, because of the scorpions and the snakes, is we would take two people. One would strictly be there to watch, and the other one would work on the aircraft.
And you were there how long?
From August to April, middle of August to the middle of April. Almost 8 months.
Okay. Now, when the Grand War started, what did you do?
We were involved primarily when the part of the war came into play where they started utilizing the Cobra helicopters, which was primarily, it was the very end of January. It was about a week and a half after the war had started. The war started on the 17th of January. And on the 29th and 30th, I think right in the very last couple of days of January, they called us in on a mission up in Kofji. And I think over there they might have called it El Kofji, but it was K-H-A-F-J-I, I believe, Kofji. And the Battle of Kofji was a town that had been taken over, obviously, by Iraq, and they had taken over the entire town. And so we had a part in that mission of sending in our Hueys and Cobras, primarily to put in fire that they had coordinated with the ground troops. So the whole plan obviously came into play. But what we did on that was about 2 full days of, we loaded up aircraft after aircraft. They would come back, we'd load them up, they'd come back, and they were going in and putting fire down in that city, and as we began to take over that town. So up until that, we did a lot of missions where we loaded up the aircraft, but they weren't directly involved. Obviously, you're always loaded in case you need it. But a lot of times we went in as escort for ground troops, or have air support ready for ground troops. Anything where our planes or helicopters were going to be needed, we just kept them loaded. So every day from the day the war started until it ended, that's what we did. We loaded them up, and you do a lot less maintenance. You just try to figure out how to make things work because you don't have time, but you still do what you can.
Now, did you ever get into Iraq?
No,
Okay.
no, our unit did not.
Yes. Okay. What's the most vivid thing, most vivid memory of Arabia?
Oh, nothing was really good. I mean, at that time, I believe, by the time the war started, going back to that question you asked a while ago, we eventually did get radio, and there was, I believe it was called Red, White, Blue, or Stars and Stripes. And it was a radio station. I don't know how it was set up, but it was American. And it was from over there is where it was broadcast from. I don't know where, I don't know all the logistics of it. But at that time, they were reporting daily on the war. So we could hear what was going on amongst the entire, whatever we had, 500,000 troops over there. We could hear play-by-play. Within hours, we were hearing what the United States was hearing. And so we were able to keep up with exactly what was going on. And that was probably the best thing that happened, was once we got that radio. But vivid-wise, I just remember probably at that time, and I don't feel the same way now, but we had, when we came back from that Battle of Kofji, several of our pilots had a lot of kills over there. And at that time I joined in. It was exciting. It was, hey, this is what I'm here for. I don't feel the same about all that now. I'm not saying I'm anti-war, because I'm not, but I'm just saying I don't have the excitement of knowing lives were lost. And looking back then, that was probably the most, nothing had happened for 6 months, and all of a sudden, I'm loading up all these weapon systems and sending them off, and they're using them, and they're killing a lot of people, and they came back, and it was joyful at that time. Like I said, I don't share in that same emotion now, but that was the highlight.
Oh yeah. How far was Jubeo from the Iraqi border? You know?
I don't know how far.
Okay.
I don't know. When the war started, on a night, daily and nightly, particularly at night, we would get our NBC, our nuclear biological chemical group that was assigned to us. They had all kinds of equipment set up, and now we knew how to don and clear and put on gas masks and our mop suit and that kind of thing, but we weren't as experts in that area. But on a nightly basis, and sometimes in the daytime even, we would get 2 or 3 alarms set off every single night. And if you were asleep, or if you were down on the tarmac working on the planes or loading them, wherever you were, that gas mask never left your side. And we put that thing on sometimes 2-3 times a day, and sometimes you'd have to leave it on until they could do an all clear, which might be an hour. Hot, sweaty, difficult to breathe. It was miserable at first. You got used to it eventually. But there were a lot of those threats because Iraq was doing a lot of bizarre things in that war, setting all of the oil wells on fire. I mean, their strategy was obviously a desperate strategy that was not working, but nonetheless, it was an experience.
So when you left Jubeo, where'd you go?
When we left Jebel, when we came back from Desert Storm, we came back to our home base, so I came back to Camp Pendleton.
Okay. Yeah. And you were in Jubeo, how long were you in Jubeo?
That whole time I was there, so almost 8 months.
8 months.
Yep.
You left in April of
91.
Okay.
Yeah. I think April the 12th was when we flew our first stick out, so April 12th, I believe, was when we left.
Okay. And what did you do when you got back to Camp Pendleton?
Well, we celebrated. One of the things that was nice about Desert Storm was the American people supported the troops. And at my age, I knew just enough to know what it was like for Vietnam vets when they came back, and I knew there was quite a contrast in how they were treated and how we were treated. So it was pretty nice knowing that you came back, you felt like you did something, for your country, and you had the people's support, and so it was a nice feeling. I came back in one piece. We didn't lose anybody from my squadron, so it was all the way around. It was a win-win. And so came back, kind of started fitting back into. I think I took a 3-week leave period and came back home and visited my family, and then went back. And then I got out about a year and a half after that is when I got out of the military. And so I came back, and we kind of went back into our regiment, our daily routine, kind of like we always did. Continued to do exercises out in the desert in Yuma and 29 Palms. But basically just kind of got back to the way things were before.
So anything happened after you got back to Camp Pendleton until you got out of the military?
No, not really. Right before I got out, I think maybe my last 6 months, my HMLA 367 squadron that I was attached to the entire time, they were getting ready to go back on that cyclical 6-month Western Pacific tour. Mm-hmm. And it was at the time where I was going to be getting out of the Marine Corps. And so what they do with me and a few other people is they've moved us from this squadron over to a different attachment. Same base. Matter of fact, it was right next door. It was a squadron right next door. And so I became part of HMLA 169 and finished out the rest of my time there.
So in your military career, did you work mainly on the UH-1N or the Cobra? Or
the UH-1N?
UH-1N?
Yep, the UH-1N and the AH-1W Cobra.
Okay.
UH-1N Huey, AH-1W Cobra.
And when did you come to Bartlesville?
I moved here in 2013, October of 2013.
Why'd you come here?
Well, Bartlesville, you know, as I said, I grew up in Coffeyville and spent, 16 years of my life there until I went to the military. And then when I got out of the military, I moved back to Coffeyville and went to the junior college for 2 years. And then on to Missouri Southern over in Joplin and finished up college. And then from there, the rest of my time was spent in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. I've lived in both of those areas. And I've got young kids. I got married late in life. First time I got married, I was 40. And so I've got a 5 and an 8-year-old. And I wanted to be in a small town. I knew enough about Bartlesville growing up 40 miles away. We'd come here a lot. And I always liked it. And I always felt like it was a good-sized town, not too close to, the busy metropolitan areas, Tulsa and Oklahoma City type thing. And so we eventually, my wife and I talked about it for a couple of years and came back to visit a lot because my dad lives here. We'd never lived here growing up, but when he retired, he and my stepmother moved to Fort Gibson and lived there for several years. And then eventually it was too much. They lived on acreage and they moved here, and that's where they wanted to live. And so I was always back here visiting. So I've always been exposed to Bartlesville, and I just knew it was a good place. I felt like to raise a family and to live, and so that's how we ended up here.
Where'd you meet your wife?
Met her in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you get married?
Got married in 2008, and we were living in Oklahoma City, and I had just left a company, a large company that I'd been working for years. I've been there about 11 years. I was in management, but I wanted to go do something different. And so one of my Marine Corps buddies that was from Coffeyville, that this never came up in our interview, but we went to boot camp and he was 2 weeks behind me. And I'm going to go off on a rabbit trail for a minute and you can remind me what your question was. It was a gentleman that he was a year younger than me in Coffeyville, and we weren't really friends. I just knew of him, he knew of me, and I went to boot camp, and about 2 weeks later I saw him in a different platoon. You can't talk. So there was a couple of times in that 3 months where he was standing in his platoon and I was in mine, and we were close enough where we were whispering. And so we'd say hi, and of course it's hard to even recognize him because your hair's all gone, you got a cover on, so you just look different. But I still knew it was him and he knew it was me. And then I saw him right after that when I got stationed in Millington. He showed up 2 weeks later, and he was in Millington doing his A training. Then I go to California to Camp Pendleton for the rest of my training, and he shows up there. And then I got put in my squadron, HMLA 367, and 2 weeks later he checks in. Nobody knows that we're from the same town, because the one thing the Marine Corps does not like is to make you happy.
Yeah.
So if they think that two of you are from the same hometown and you're close buddies, it's kind of a funny thing to them to split you up.
What was it? What's his name?
Stan Miller.
Stan Miller.
And so he and I never let it out of the bag that we were both, weren't buddies at home, but we knew each other for years. And so we went to the Gulf War together.
Yeah.
So we didn't really go to boot camp together, but he was behind me 2 weeks. So everywhere I went, he showed up, and it was just purely coincidental. So we went 5 years together in the same squadron. And so I say all that to get myself back onto your question. We got married in Oklahoma City. I quit my job I'd been at a long time. She had been at a place for about 3 years. She quit. We had several discussions. Decided when we got married we wanted to move to Colorado. Somewhere different, new. I was born there, but I left there when I was 4. She had never really moved anywhere but Oklahoma City. And so she was all game for it. And so we went to Colorado, and I was going to start building homes with Stan Miller, who had been out there building homes for 10, 12 years. And he had been trying to get me out there for years to help him. And so we moved out there, but my wife did not like Colorado. She was homesick. We lasted 6 months. I would still be there probably, because I think it's beautiful out there. But yeah, we came back.
And you came to Bartlesville.
No, we came back, we moved right back to Oklahoma City,
Okay, okay,
and was there for about 5 years before we came over here.
okay.
So,
What's your wife's name?
Kelly?
Kelly.
Yep.
Okay. Would you join the Marines again?
Yes. Not now in this body, but if I could go back in time, yes, I wouldn't do anything different.
I'd like to do a word association.
Okay.
I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction. The first one is boot camp.
Funny. Shouldn't be, but it is.
Alpha school.
Information overload.
Aviation ordnance.
Phenomenal.
Mag 39.
Never forget the name.
USS Taro.
Don't want to go back.
Desert Shield.
Horrible.
Desert Storm.
Once in a lifetime experience.
Norman Schwarzkopf.
Powerful.
Colin Powell.
Highly respected.
George Bush.
Presidential.
How do you want to be remembered?
What's that?
How do you want to be remembered?
I would really like to be remembered as somebody that cares about people. I feel like I've done a lot of, I've got a large array of background experiences. I've done a lot of things, but you know, as I get older and my children get to the levels where they're at now, I just really want them to feel like their dad gave it everything he had and cared for people and tried to help.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Nothing I can think of about me.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview. And again, this is February 6th, 2017. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Michael Gilliland in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.